Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
O kaeri nasai, as they say.
Thank you.
Been
Yes,
away out of
tadaima.
Japan and you've come back. How does it feel to be back in Japan after you've been away?
I had hoped that Japan's heat would have gone away in a week that I was away, but it's still here. If you come into Japan in October,
Still going to
late
be
September,
warm.
be careful. It's still going to be very warm. Yeah, it's a shock coming back from that. Like I was in Europe and the UK and it was 15, 16, 17 degrees. So just perfect, really. So it was a bit of a shocker to come back to double that.
Yeah. It looks like another week of fairly hot weather and then it starts to peter off a little bit. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, so today we're discussing sports and the business of sports. And in my family, actually, last night, we were just discussing the amazing opportunities that there are for sports people in Japan. And it might not be very well known, really, but just how many companies, for example, have their own teams and various things. So there's so many ways to be employed as a sports person in Japan at various levels.
Absolutely.
What have you seen, Catherine? Right.
Well, of course, I'm in a couple of companies which support basketball and support rugby and other sports as well, and also have been sponsors for some of the people within the company that have gone to overseas to compete, say in the Olympics, Paralympics, or in other international events. So the companies are very much behind sports people who are in the company, and it gives really great morale to the company. People have something to rah for. They get up early to watch these games. So it's really quite amazing to see that happening within the company and see the joy of sports and business coming together.
Right. Yeah. So not every company, but many companies will have, for example, someone who is training in athletics, right? High jump or long jump or something, but they also work at the company and have a job and get supported on their way to the Olympics. So amazing. And we wish New Zealand had many more opportunities like this for sports people. So today we are talking with a special guest.
Indeed. Our guest today is Craig Fenton, and Craig is the Chief Executive of New Zealand Rugby Commercial. They are in the business of the All Blacks, the Black Ferns, and other teams in black. Craig's a great business leader, entrepreneur who's worked in technology, media, and the entertainment industry for 20 years. We had a really great chat with him. He came to Japan recently. I met him during the Prime Minister's visit, and a highlight for me was obviously to support Craig and New Zealand Rugby commercial and strategic interests by being the MC of the New Zealand Sports and Business Leadership Luncheon event. We had some amazing former All Blacks on stage and of course the Prime Minister in the audience. This is a really exciting chat, I think, Jane, you'll agree, because I think apart from what we actually talked about with Craig, I think you and I became really big fangirls of what Craig's up to. An amazing guy. I think New Zealand Rugby are really very lucky to have him on the team, as it were. And so,
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that everyone really enjoys this combination of rugby, business, teamwork, leadership, cultural exchanges, international collaborations that we talked about with Craig.
And even Lionel Ritchie.
Yeah, listen and see.
All right, let's hear it from Craig. Kia ora, Craig. Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show today.
Sure, and konnichiwa. Thank you.
Yeah, nice one. So we like to start with a warm-up question. Today, our question for you is there something in particular about Japan that you're really interested in or obsessed with?
Food. I'm sure you get that a lot, but I absolutely adore sushi and sashimi. So the sort of freshness of the fish, the different ways that it's cut. I'm a real miso soup guy as well. In fact, I had sushi and sashimi for lunch today, and that's actually my staple.
Well, there you go. I was not expecting that.
No, and obviously warming up for the Jandals in Japan podcast by having some Japanese food
getting in the mood. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow, amazing. How about you, Jane? What do you like? about Japan or obsessed with?
Current obsession is the Shinto religion in Japan, which is a little bit of a weird thing to say, but it's actually the base of all of Japanese culture. Everything that you see in Japanese culture, you can almost always trace it back to something in the Shinto religion. And it's just very interesting to see how those connections work and where Japanese culture has originated from. How about you, Catherine?
Ooh, I'd have to say, like, just as you said that, I thought seasons, only because I'm so sick of this summer season that we've got right now.
Yeah.
And I really want it to become autumn. We've had such a hot season, Craig, and we've got a typhoon blowing through right now that is the slowest ever typhoon. It's just slugging along. So I think seasons, because when it goes to autumn, it's gorgeous. I love Japanese winter. It's not cold. And then there's spring and it's just awesome. So yeah, I'll go for seasons. Thank you, Japan, for delivering 4 seasons that actually are 4 seasons, not like New Zealand, which is 4 seasons in one day.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Craig Fenton, actually, in your full name, you're Chief Executive of New Zealand Rugby Commercial, and that is the business of the All Blacks, the Black Ferns, and other teams that are in black. We love what you do, and we're so glad to have you here. I got to personally meet you on your trip to Japan recently and was able to support you and New Zealand Rugby on the New Zealand Sports and Business Leadership Luncheon that we had during that Prime Minister's visit. Excited to have you here today to talk about all the questions. Shall we kick off then?
Go for it. And thanks for your help in the lunch. It was awesome to have you as our compare.
I loved it. Yeah, it was such fun. I can't wait for the next invitation. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about your background, your first interactions with, rugby and with Japan.
Well, short question with probably a long answer, so I'll try to keep it to the truncated level. I'm a Kiwi. I grew up Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and then moved overseas when I was about 28, and I was there for 25 years in Europe, mostly London, sort of split the time towards the end between the UK and France. And the rugby connection actually has a sort of a full cycle story with a 25-year gap in between. Before I left, I was a lawyer. That was my first profession, I suppose.
Were you?
Yeah, recovering lawyer.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, horses hair, wig, black gown, the whole 9 yards.
Goodness
And
me, there you go.
I did a little bit of commercial work, and one of my clients at the time was the New Zealand Rugby Football Union. So in 1996, I was part of the team that worked on the News International deal that created the professional sport. It was the first deal that pushed, I think it was $550 million into the sport. The IRB at the time, now World Rugby, declared the game open. Players could become professional. We stopped losing players to league, which was already professional, and started paying these athletes for the work that they do on the fields. And quickly, in the footsteps of that, the Adidas contract followed. Players' contracts were invented. I handled a few of them, actually handled Jonah Lomu's employment contract. And then I left and I entered the tech sector and returned 25 years later to the position that I'm in. So it's kind of like a full circle story, but through and through, I'm kind of a tech guy.
Amazing, right? And you skipped over the fact you got to be, what was it, New Zealander of the Year in the UK at some stage there?
That was as much a surprise as it was to my wife, my family, and everyone who really knows me. But it was also a great privilege and honor, and led into some amazing things. Actually, I was part of the delegation that attended the King's coronation, for example, and that was somehow connected to that. So there I found myself beautiful kakahu on that Ngāti Rana had given me in recognition of the award, sitting in Westminster Abbey talking to Lionel Ritchie about why he also had a kakahu.
Amazing.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Look, hang on a minute. Are we doing the podcast for Jandals in Japan today, Jane? What are we going to do?
Should we just do This Is Your Life, Craig?
Just do
Just
This
skip
Is
to
Your
that.
Life. Craig, that's so fascinating. And I mean, I think you had a regular job at Google, but it sounds like all this other stuff that you were doing was super fantastic and fun.
Yeah, well, I've had a string of side hustles, I suppose you'd say. The day job's always been interesting, but I think most jobs that we have, fascinating as they may be, don't fulfill 100% of our interests and passions. And I'm a great believer in having the sort of side hustle. This is probably a side hustle for both of you, isn't it?
Oh,
Well, it
definitely.
is, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm still a lawyer, haven't quite fallen off the edge yet, but you know, this brings the enrichment to all of us. Jane and I love doing this. You know, we want to take it miles further, and we'll have a chat with you a bit later about that.
Yeah.
But the point is, yes, you just can't be one pure item in your career, right? You have to do a few other things to liven yourself up.
No, that's right. Though I was pretty busy in the, day job's very busy now. The day job that I had before this, which
Yeah,
was Google, as you say, was pretty busy. And I was with a
yeah.
company called Nature before that, all in technology. But the wonderful thing, and it was probably a habit that I developed while I was at Google, was to really explore what serves your passions. And that led me into angel investment. I got my pilot's license, which is still a hobby today. I started a podcast. I'm the world's worst, smallest example of a monetized YouTuber. The channel's still there. And all sorts of, I've started a record label, which I still have. I'm actually about to go and see the artist that I'm signing in New Zealand tonight. All sorts of fun stuff.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I have to take us back to rugby. Oh, compared to all of that. But anyway, rugby we still love, of course. But okay, let's go back to when you were coming to Japan, how this idea came up, because it's, you know, the Prime Minister was coming to Japan with a lot of business leaders from New Zealand. But this idea of this luncheon with a sports edge to leadership, how did that come about?
I think there's a lot of parallels between professional sport, elite sport, and certainly our version of it. I think we have a sort of special version of it with the All Blacks and the Black Ferns and teams in black. There's a lot of parallels between this and business. So the idea was to fill a room with business people for the most part and talk about those parallels. We had the wonderful Conrad Smith and Sir John Kerwin there, and Simon Curran, and obviously Catherine, you were introducing, and I had the Prime Minister on one side and the CEO of our biggest partner on the other. Taisho is the company, and I think people got a lot from it.
Yeah, I know when I was down having my part of the lunch while the main panel was going on, I really wished we had subtitles going along what everybody was saying, because there were some real gems there. And, you know, JK, Sir John Kerwin was just amazing, as well as Conrad, but just felt overwhelmed and so proud of it, the way it worked out. And I think people in the room, Jane, you were there too, the leaders and the people around the tables were really enjoying it and could see those parallels you're talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We want you to do more on that, of course, but you mentioned Taisho there. Obviously, great pharmaceutical company that are now sponsoring and part of the Lipopitan Day, as it said. You probably heard it. Not D. I say Day.
Yeah.
Lipopitan
Day.
Day. That's the way you say D. But anyway, you managed to get some really good sponsorship deals and collaborations. Are you able to talk about what that means from a commercial point of view for rugby, for the All Blacks brand, for New Zealand?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, sponsorship's one of these sort of strange words that probably means everything and nothing. So what it means in our world is aligning with a brand, a company that finds some mutual association value or synergy, about who they are and what they stand for, and who we are and what we stand for as a value. And that side-by-side partnership is a way of moving people, like brands are stories, really. They cause us to feel something in some way. And what our sponsors find valuable in us, they use to move people, which could be employees, it could be business-to-business customers, it could be business-to-consumer customers, in ways they find valuable to them, and in ways that reinforce their own values and impart them or manifest them in some way. So we've got about 30 sponsors in our portfolio in Japan. We've got Nisui, which is our oldest sponsor, Taisho, which is our largest sponsor, and Mitsui Fudosan, which is our most recent sponsor. And all of these companies are very different companies, but they have this thing in common. They find the association valuable, uplifting to different members of their sort of stakeholder or customer portfolio. And that's how sponsorship works.
That's how it works, Jane.
Yeah. Wow. I did not know that Nisui was the oldest sponsor. How long have they been sponsoring for?
I think it's close to 30 years, so it sort of almost predates
Wow.
the television deal. Yeah.
I bet nobody knows that, right? There's almost no New Zealanders that know that about Nisui. Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, because for example, people probably first think of sponsorship as what's on the jersey,
On the shirt, yeah.
right? Yet it's not that. You're talking about something that's in behind there, that's been a thrust behind the All Blacks, the brand, and the Ferns, right? Through
Excellent.
sponsorship and an investment, right? Investment in the brand.
Yeah, and it can mean a
Yeah.
number of things. Sort of the most obvious one, as you say, Catherine, is the name of the jersey, but we also, we film our matches so they're on telly. You see the LED signs around, and we do a lot of activation off the field as well. We talked about the performance clubs. That's an example of an off the field activity that could easily be very interesting, and it is interesting actually to many of our partners and valuable to them. So there's many canvases that we can paint with.
What is it particularly about Japan and New Zealand and that connection? Is there something there that's even bigger and bolder with those values or what we stand for that you mentioned that's uplifting? I loved that word, uplifting. Is there something in that you see more? And especially since you came to Japan recently, could you feel that in the conversations you were having here?
Yeah, definitely. And it was striking, although the cultures on one hand are very different, they're also strikingly similar if you sort of dig a little bit under the surface. So I guess I frame that as three things. Finding familiarity in our differences is weird, but it's there. So it's striking how much Māori culture, our indigenous culture, and Japanese culture have in common, the sort of respect and reverence to one's elders, all of the whakapapa, the family who has come before, this idea of stewardship of the land, identity in reference to the land and the customs that sit around it. These are very parallel cultural traits between Japanese culture, as I understand it, and Māori culture. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in both Japan and in New Zealand, there are some fantastically innovative ideas that come out. I remember studying actually Japanese manufacturing and Kanban. Is that the way you say it? So these innovations that were uniquely Japanese and led to these tremendous, consistent quality products. A lot of the engineering brilliance, Mr. Honda, who was a pioneer in his space. And in New Zealand, I think we have the same thing. In many ways, the isolation and the unworldliness, this sort of tucked away in the bottom of the world. We don't know the rules, so we don't know we're breaking them. And therefore, we kind of come up with brilliant and interesting things. And the trip out there was a wonderful opportunity to celebrate those tall poppies, both companies and leaders within the companies from both Japan and New Zealand. And I think we've got a lot in common geopolitically as well. We both sit on this Pacific rim of fire, so to speak, the edge of the Pacific plate. And we have a long-standing trade relationship in terms of export, in terms of foreign direct investment, and actually investment both ways. And we have common interests in areas like security. So these were all areas that certainly our Prime Minister Luxon, was interested in leaning into. And why am I there? I'm the rugby guy. I was very fortunate to be the person there. But I think from a New Zealand perspective, rugby is a very important and potent diplomatic soft power. It's something that's recognised globally. It's a brand that's sort of, in many ways, come to stand for who we are as a people and the beauty of the sort of cacophony of multicultural wonder of New Zealand manifests on field and kind of represents New Zealand on its best day. And that's understood, sort of consumed in really, I think, an alluring quality that is important in geopolitical relations and trade relations just as much as it is in sporting relations.
I've been on the sporting field recently, actually, at grassroots rugby level. Took my son along to the local rugby group here on a Sunday morning, and everyone was naturally curious to know, where are you from, Jane? And so I said, when I said New Zealand, they all went, ooh, like it was like, you're from the promised land, the land of the All Blacks kind of reaction amongst the parents of the kids who are, practicing rugby on a Sunday morning here in Japan. So yeah, that brand is very deep rooted within the rugby community. So I just thought I would share that little anecdote with you there.
Oh, it's a beautiful anecdote. Did you see the Japanese kids doing the haka
Yes,
to greet our Māori All Blacks when they were there?
it
Just
was
full
amazing.
examples of this. And that's such a touching reverence and respect that goes very deep at a cultural level.
So the whole point of the panel and the meeting over lunch was to sort of get leadership involved in these concepts that you've talked about. How's that going? Have we got some more plans on that to take that leadership and rugby connection further between New Zealand and Japan?
Yes, absolutely, on a number of levels. First of all, the performance lunch or lab, as we sometimes call it in its longer format, is back in Japan on Japanese soil in October, I think it is. So we'll be doing more of those, and they're highly valued. We do a lot of coaching clinics as well with some of our sponsors, and people like Dan Carter and Richie McCaw attend those on a pretty regular basis. So that's a great thrill and honour for the organisations that we do that in partnership with. We have an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with the Japan Rugby Football Union. So we play there a lot. The Māori All Blacks have just played there very recently. The All Blacks are playing in October in Yokohama. And this is a ritual. The Japanese rugby scene is really, really strong. A lot of our players actually go there and play in League One, the top league there. And how about those Brave Blossoms? I mean, what an awesome team. Really a tier one rugby nation. And we saw them in their full glory, didn't we, during Olympic World Cup?
Absolutely. And even since then, when the All Blacks were here last and played Japan, Jane and I were in the stadium. And given, if there were another 10 minutes, 5 minutes on the clock, we think the Blossoms would have actually taken over. It was a pretty close game, but it was certainly on the edge of our seats for that.
Well, thank goodness it's not 90 minutes like football. Eh?
Yeah, but we're looking forward to them coming back in October. How do people get to know more about the performance labs? Who can join those or observe or be part of them? Is that pretty closed as to who you have involved, or you're wanting as many people as possible to know about them and somehow be a part or get some of that uplifting, passion that you're bringing?
Yeah, there's different formats. So some of them are open, some of them are private events. But if you use that wonderful go-to tool and just Google it, All Blacks Performance Labs, you'll find information very soon. Or Bing it, or or Line it, or whatever your chosen engine is. Yahoo in Japan, of course, isn't it?
Yes, Yahoo, and they love Line in Japan. Line's actually the most popular, I think, isn't it, Jane? I think Line was the most popular app, and then YouTube is second. So you need to get yourselves on YouTube. Yeah. Well,
Can I just ask, like, if someone's listening to this and they're going, well, I want to join this, but I don't think this is for me, or maybe I'm not important enough to join one of these labs. Who are these labs actually for?
They tend to be for corporations. So they're aimed at drawing these parallels between performance on the field and performance in the business world. So that tends to be the area that attracts the most attention. I don't think they're exclusively interesting, though, for corporations. I think there's probably governments or non-profits who would get a lot out of it, and many others. And there's lots of different different formats. I mentioned coaching clinics as well. But just showing up to a game actually is a pretty good lesson in itself. You see the example play out on the field of perseverance, of the ups and downs of navigating a high pressure situation and how people perform in that setting.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot now around well-being and mental fitness. Does that also come into it as part of the labs, or is that slightly separate? Because we both noticed this Mindset Engage ambassadors initiative that we've also seen. So we're wondering if you're bringing in a well-being aspect to the labs as well.
Yes, definitely. I think and if you look at the most elite level of sport, whether you're looking at rugby or tennis or golf, how about Lydia Coleman, or
Amazing.
whatever sport you choose, most of these athletes have fairly indistinguishable technical skills. I'm being a little bit unfair there, but they're really, really good at what they do is what I mean. And the thing that distinguishes the greats from the averages is up here, right? It's mental. So that's definitely true of professional sports, about how people perform in those moments that matter under pressure and how they respond to pressure. And is it a debilitating thing where you sort of shut down and you can't think about what to do next, or you're too nervous to take a swing, to take the kick, to do whatever? Or does it excite you? Do you draw energy from it? And do you use it as a positive? So definitely the mental side of sport is important on the field as it is off. We have those pressure situations, don't we, in business every day, where you've got that big presentation or you've got a really important decision to take and it's really not clear whether you turn left or right. And, a lot of people's jobs or the welfare of the company might be riding on it. These are these moments that matter, that we all encounter. And just from a well-being perspective, people are just at their best when they feel they're showing up as their true selves. There's no sort of barriers there. They feel relaxed and have the, psychological safety to take risks and know that if they get it wrong, the colleagues that are around them will be the first to put the hand down to help them back up, put the arm around the shoulder, not kick them. And, that's the difference in terms of corporate context, from a well-being perspective, from a sort of a cultural perspective. That's the difference between a company that can innovate and a company that is too scared to.
Interesting. I mean, if you can actually do some work here with a lot of corporates in Japan who frankly find it very hard to make mistakes and be shown to be expressing a difficulty with the way that something's going, or admitting that something is hard and still doing it, or failing, right? These are concepts. If you can break through some of that, crack the code on that to help Japanese corporates, men and women, I think it'd be an amazing thing if it comes through again and you're able to do that. It'd be absolutely awesome. Wow.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
you were in Japan, and you were sitting around the table with the sponsors you've talked about, your partners, what did you notice about the way that they did their discussions with you or their business? Could you pick out any cultural or business cultural aspects that you thought were very interesting about Japan, or indeed that you thought that would be something we could do in New Zealand? Is there anything like that came up for you?
Yeah, there's a real choreography about it. So that's the first thing. So the process of handing the card over with both hands, examining it really closely, not just chucking it to one side, but sort of nurturing it like it's a great treasure that's been handed to you, showing the respect to the individual that you've just met, and and lowering your eyes and providing that physical show of respect. I think the way that seating works, the senior to senior, and then the quite clear hierarchy that is detectable in a room is sort of very noticeable in Japan. And I think just the deeper purpose-driven connection that exists in companies that give them, I think, real substance, cultural substance. This is who we are. We've got this amazing history. This is where we stand in the world, that identity that's so strong. Certainly the identity thing is something that I want to harvest and take, that we can learn a lot from that. I think the deference and respect for experience and elders, so to speak, and is a great strength. It can also be a great weakness. I think if that becomes a point that mutes slightly quieter voices at the table, right? If you hire a team, if you invite somebody to the dance, you better get them dancing, right? Otherwise, there's not much point in
Yeah.
Right.
being there. So yeah. So I think there's probably some there's some really noticeable things that set Japanese business culture apart, and some of them I think are tremendous strengths that we can absolutely harness and learn from. Others I'm not sure are.
Yeah. Out of what
Interesting.
you said with identity, I mean, New Zealand's got an identity. The All Blacks have an identity. So, what is it that you're thinking of when you saw that in action? What's the identity piece that's really you'd like to harvest, as you said? So, can you tell us a bit more about that? Because we all
Well,
pretty sure that we've got our identity. We know who we are. We live off the coattails of the All Blacks and leverage that as our badge of honour in this country here. So I'm interested to hear what you saw that you thought was, hang on a minute, but there's also this part of identity that maybe we're not capturing.
I think we've got actually a lot in common. I think you're right to call it like that, and I think it's sort of exuded and exemplified actually in the All Blacks and the Black Ferns and rugby in general. It's got a long history. We recognise, we honour, and we try to amplify our legacy. But actually, an important part of honouring and amplifying your legacy is to make fresh footprints. That the best thing that you can do to honour your ancestors and those that have come before you is to head in a new direction. And that sounds a little bit paradoxical, but we stand, certainly in New Zealand rugby in the footsteps of 130 years of whakapapa or predecessors who have come before us. And it's in this moment that we get the opportunity to make fresh footprints and build on that legacy. And building, by definition, requires something new and different. So the notion of legacy is both forward-looking and rearward-looking. And that's what the teams in black mean when they say they're sort of custodians of the jersey and their job is to hand it over in a better place. So I don't have any sort of difficulty about the sort of purpose of rugby and the teams that we have. I do think it can be translated more strongly into the corporate and non-profit institutions that we have in New Zealand. So that's more my point.
Got it.
Yeah, I think so. Especially if you join an organization in Japan, it's really hard to leave.
Well,
Yeah, any organization. It could be even your local sports team, which is something I've experienced recently, changing from one baseball team to another. It was like we were going through almost a death in the family, having to give up our loyalty and identity as members of this team because it wasn't good for us anymore and moved to this other team. Yeah,
wow.
it was a
So,
very drawn out, purpose long situation. It had a happy ending in the end, but it was not easy.
no,
Yeah, it's different, Jane, isn't it, to the ending a term where it's meant to end,
Yeah.
right? That's natural and it's accepted. But when you move out of something earlier than perhaps everybody's emotionally prepared for, it can be a very difficult challenge.
yeah, no doubt. And I've seen and heard and studied, the sort of tenure, certainly 20 years ago, it was very normal for you to start, as I understand, a job in Japan and be there when you retire.
Yep.
Yeah.
And perhaps less common these days. Whereas, business culture, let's say in the US, is quite different. I mean, you can chop and change all of the time. And I think there's strengths and weaknesses to both of those models.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing to think about when you've got coaches and players coming to Japan and they're on a contract. They're not expected to depart any earlier than that contract term. And so it's really important that it's seen that way. And I'm sure you're reinforcing that too, but especially in Japan, to depart any sooner, unless it was obviously something extremely tragic that you couldn't have any control over. But it is great to see this trend. I think it's since the university's tour of Japan in 1936, so my research tells me. But what is it that's kept this going? Again, like you talked about the long-term sponsorship that Nasui had with the All Blacks, for example. Why is it that, again, these team members are leaving from, say, All Blacks for a particular period, a sabbatical, and coming through here? Is that also part of what you've been talking about in enriching the sport here, giving some of the All Blacks and hopefully the ferns, the black ferns in the future? And we do know one black fern is coming to Japan shortly, which we're very excited about. So tell me what's benefiting there between the two countries and between New Zealand Rugby and the Japan Rugby Football Union as well.
Yeah, I was with Portia Woodman-Whitcliffe today, by the way. I think that's
Really?
Yeah, she was
Congrats to her.
Just an amazing leader, probably the best winger in the world, in my humble opinion, in either men's or the women's game, and just a beautiful person as well. And you wouldn't want to be standing in front of you when she's at full speed.
Look out, Japan.
Yeah.
Look out, Japan, absolutely.
Yeah,
Somebody
we're thrilled.
Yeah, and Rena's coming over as well, and I'm sure she'll add a lot. I sat next to Bowden Barrett at dinner very recently, and I was talking to him about Japan. So it's not my lived experience. I'm certainly not a player, and you've been in trouble if I entered the playing field in rugby, but Bowden's one of our best, and he spoke very fondly of his experience there. He thought the rugby was very high quality. Point number one, like it's really important for players at that level to continue to be tested, to have the opportunity to play different sides who play different styles. It gives them versatility, adaptability, all this. And of course, obviously fitness, an opportunity to work in a slightly different and perhaps more multicultural team environment is a really interesting and valuable learning experience. There's a beautiful culture. The country itself is beautiful in terms of its landscape, its music, its food. So it's a wonderful cultural experience, I think, for the players. Certainly, Bowden was really effusive in his praise about it. There's less call on them to do big sort of commercial stuff constantly. When they're in the All Blacks, it's a very high-profile team, and there's a lot of demands being in that. And so I think they feel like they can be a little bit more private from a family perspective. Perhaps they're less well known and not stopped on the street the whole time, and maybe years, I don't know. And it gives them a little bit of variety, right? We all are variety hounds of some sort, and enjoy a bit of a change. A change is as good as a holiday.
Yeah, they're really great reasons. And we loved, obviously, we talked with Bowden Barrett and Aaron Smith, and they both were genuinely in praise of Japan and how Japan had looked after them. And they did actually mention both the aspect of being able to spend more time with their family, their kids, than they did perhaps back in New Zealand. And we loved that idea and didn't really think about that as a positive of coming to Japan. We thought it might be the opposite. So it was really refreshing to hear that. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, less travel as well. The cost of the old planes, and 80% of the matches they play in the All Blacks are abroad.
Sure. We always ask our guests their one gem, the one gem that they would consider the most valuable piece of advice or a tip for people who are, say, Kiwis coming to Japan, and what they should be looking out for. And we've had lots of people talk about, be careful about, you do the business cards, those sorts of things. But is there something that you saw while you were here that you might think, Kiwis really need to be careful about that when they come to Japan, or I really advise them to do this, even from your short stay and experience here?
Yes, well, I think, Catherine, you and Jane will be much better advisors than I am on this, because you live there and speak the language. But I think in going into any new country, the most important thing is to be open and curious, and really be genuinely interested and run towards the cultural differences, because what might seem strange and slightly exotic on the face has probably got real substance to it. And there's something there that we can learn from. So be curious.
Good one.
Very good. Any crystal ball moments for us? Anything you're seeing in your crystal ball for the future between Japan and New Zealand?
Well, more of the same, I hope. It's definitely a priority market and partnership at a rugby level that we see. Tremendous growth potential in terms of matches and the future evolution of competitions. Watch this space. And we also think the world of our Japanese partners, and we'd really love to build on those very solid foundations that we've got with the Taishos of this world, the Mitsui Fudo-sans of this world, the Nsuis of this world, and hopefully welcome more Japanese partners into our waka.
Love it.
Very nice. Yeah.
Anything you'd like to wrap up with, Craig? Any news or initiatives other than what you've told us, or to amplify what you've already told us that you're working on that our listeners should know about?
Please do go to a game. It'll be a fantastic day or half day out, and I'm sure you'll be excited by the action. As for crystal ball moments and what's yet to come, well, watch this space. There's nothing I can talk publicly about at the moment, but I'll leave you with that sort of tantalizing,
awesome,
exciting
little snippet. And
we love it. Love
very
it.
big part of our future.
Thanks
Awesome.
so much. We are so happy to have had you today. Got some really amazing stuff that you've told us. Congratulations now on becoming a Jandal in Japan.
Thanks very much, Catherine and Jane.
Wow, that was certainly a mind-blowing discussion from Lionel Ritchie at the King's coronation and all the other things that we spoke about with Craig. Like you said in the intro, Catherine, we're so lucky to
Amazing.
have him working for
They are
New
lucky.
Zealand Rugby business,
They are
right?
very lucky. Wow. Former lawyer too, just shows you what.
Yeah, that full
what's in
circle
people's-
moment, right?
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's probably why we initially connected, even without me knowing. having
You
the
sensed
same
the lawyer
trade.
in him,
Ooh,
yes?
I did. There's so many things there. It's so hard to do a summary or pick out some great things. But I did love how he talked about brands and that brands are not logos or slogans. They are stories that cause you to feel something. That really made me stop and think and move people. And I was thinking, ooh, what would be the brand? What is the brand of Jandals in Japan? So I think
Yeah,
you and
yeah.
I could talk about that. But it would be very interesting to think about that from a brand perspective, that it's not about the Jandal as such, but what it evokes in people's minds and how it makes them feel listening to this podcast. So that was one thing. Thank you, Craig. The other thing was, I would say, diplomatic soft power that rugby provides.
Yeah.
It really, I loved how he said that it represents New Zealand on its best day. That was such a great turn of phrase. So what is that? Is it being a good loser? We've lost a few games recently and both Black Ferns and the All Blacks. And you think, what is it? Being a good loser, getting yourself up, apologising. What does New Zealand look like on its best day, right? What does it show through rugby? Doing what you say you're going to do. There's so many interesting things there. I thought that was a really good thing that has still got me pondering what New Zealand looks like on its best day.
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways to play the game of rugby, as we have seen, and you see it across different countries. But I think New Zealand can be very proud about the way that it plays rugby, and I think Japan respects that and sees that, right?
Exactly. Win or lose, and even if we lose, we are still a popular brand here
Yeah.
in Japan.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the All Blacks. Can't wait for them to come in October to play the Brave Blossoms. And I think the third thing, Jane, would be just, we've heard it from a lot of our guests, but being open and curious about the culture here.
yeah.
Not slam dunking on it straight away, not saying Japan should or needs to, thinking about how to actually embrace the culture here, being very open to things that are going on, curious, asking questions. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that definitely works, and you will be welcomed with open arms with your curiosity and wanting to know more
Exactly.
about Japanese culture, etc. Right?
Exactly,
Japanese
and I think
people love that.
I love it. And I think
They
the
love
first
it.
thing starts from that business card, and we still have business cards exchanged in Japan. And I think Craig explained that whole process so beautifully with receiving that like it's a treasure, something to look after that you receive, right? When you receive someone's business card, and that's a curiosity about what's on the card, who that person is, and beyond that. So thank you, Craig. Those were just a few of the awesome things that you said today.
Yeah. I'm getting some little body chills when you're reminding me about this. So I just want to add a little something here that just came
Yeah,
to me while
go.
you were talking about the whole business card thing. And, as a New Zealander, you would look at it and go, this is a piece of paper with their name and their phone number on it. Great, I will check that later. But as I mentioned during the episode, when we talked about the things that we're interested in, right? And I said the Shinto religion. So in the Shinto religion, everything has a god in it. This is why Japanese people really take care of everything, because there's the god of various things. And so there's a little bit of that person or a kind of god in somebody's business card as well, right? So you would
Yes.
treat that with respect as well as with anything, with their pen, with any of their property, right? This is why people in Japan take care of things that you don't see them like chucking a credit card across the table at someone when you pay the bill and vice versa, right? So that's kind of a little bit about the why behind that, I think. And I think that's quite interesting. And you would approach things very differently if you knew that about that's how people in
Yeah.
Japan see things. They don't necessarily know that that's why they think that, but that is the why behind it all.
That is really
Yeah.
beautiful. I love that respectful way that you've talked about a kami-sama inside the meshi, right? Some sort of god form inside the business card. I've never
Yeah,
thought
or
of it
just
like
like
that, but I'm going to
someone's
apply
spirit, a
that.
little piece of their
A
spirit
spirit.
potentially. Yeah. Like
Excellent.
the tamashi sort of idea, a little bit of their spirit in there, and things in general, and the whole Marie Kondo thing, right? That does this spark joy thanking the objects when they're no longer useful to you, when you say goodbye to them? That's very Shinto as well, giving thanks for
Absolutely.
things. Yeah.
Well, you heard it here. Thank you so much, Jane, for that. Another
Little
layer
bit
on
of a
top of what Craig explained to us. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you, Craig. Great to hear from you. Join us for another episode soon.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jane. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!